Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 6. I'll call the meeting to order, the Government Affairs Committee meeting for August. And I'll call roll. Barry Johnson, I'm here. Jeff Carter is excused. Rick Rosner, not yet. Richard Niederberg,
Yeah,
Brandon Marino,
Yeah.
Julie Houlihan.
Here.
All right, we have 4 out of 6, so we have a quorum. Thank you. Did anybody, if there's no objection, I will consider the July 6, 2022 Government Affairs Committee meeting minutes approved. Any objections?
no,
No.
All right, hearing none, they are so deemed approved. Update by the committee chair. I was just going to mention that at the last board meeting, our 3 motions passed. One was the parcel tax ballot measure that we did not approve of. The other was supporting the municipal lobbying ordinance revisions. And the last one was supporting Assembly Bill, opposing the Assembly Bill AB 1791, Nazarian, to cap rent increases on corporate-owned rental units. And I believe Jeff got those all sent out today. He just emailed me saying they were sent, so that's great. Moving on to number 4, do we have any members of the public who wish to make a public comment? If you're on the phone, press *9. So I'm not seeing any members of the public. So number 5, responses to public comments within the committee's jurisdiction. We had no public comments, so we have no responses. So I'll move on to number 6, discussion and possible motion, community impact statement with respect to Council File 22-002-S106, which opposes SB 930, Weiner, to allow select cities in California to issue permits extending the cutoff time for alcohol sales to 4 a.m. And I have a proposed motion that I'm going to read for that before we get started here. The Board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, SCNC, agrees with City Council File 22-002-S106 to oppose SB 930 Weiner, which would allow select cities in California to issue permits extending the cutoff time for alcohol sales to 4 a.m., which could lead to an increased incidence of drunk driving and exacerbate the noise and or traffic disturbance suffered by residents living in abutting cities, and force neighboring cities and or counties to absorb increased public safety enforcement costs. This motion is also to be submitted as a separate community impact statement to CF 22-002-S106. Do I have a second?
yeah,
Thank you, Richard. And I'll ask if there's any public comment on this. If you're on the phone, press *9. I don't think we have any members of the public right at the moment, probably because we got started on time. Okay, any members of the committee? Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we are, the city council was opposing this and we're supporting the city council's opposition to this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if we say yes to this, then we agree with the city council's opposition to this bill. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that clarification. And yeah, we had to do at the board meeting the other night. But yeah, if this gets to the board, I'll definitely make that clarification again. Anyone else? Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks. Just want to point out the irony that one of the cities that wants to extend, or that will likely extend, their alcohol sales to 4 a.m. is West Hollywood, which just defunded a good portion of the sheriffs that patrol West Hollywood. So the people leaving the bars at 4 a.m. are going to be subject to being targeted for crime, and their impaired driving is going to have to be picked up by neighboring cities, because West Hollywood won't have any police presence or sheriff's presence, or very minimal, to deal with this, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, and the language in this I took from Councilmember Koretz, whose district kind of surrounds West Hollywood, and he's really worried. And that's why it says, forcing neighboring cities to absorb the public safety enforcement costs, as well as he also has pointed out that when you can drink until 4 a.m., it's not that people start drinking 2 hours later in the evening. They have now 2 hours additional to drink, so they can be that much more intoxicated. And he says studies have shown that an hour and a half after you stop drinking is perhaps when you're at your most dangerous behind the wheel. So just think of all the people that are out on the streets at 5:30 a.m. as opposed to 3:30 a.m. And I can tell you there's a huge difference. So go ahead, Richard, and then Brandon.
Yeah, I really don't want to have any blood alleys of people rushing to West Hollywood to get their final drinks of the night, or even starting late. It seems to me it's dangerous, and I'm sure that the city also does not want to lose any revenue to an adjoining city.
Yes, thanks. Go ahead, Brandon.
So what's the deal behind this? If they extend alcohol hours, they're hoping that businesses can make a little money and catch up for all the lost revenue from the pandemic? Or is this the alcohol lobby saying, here's a few bucks, let us sell more alcohol? What's the reasoning behind this?
I think
bill?
it's a little of each, because this surfaced before the pandemic and it hasn't passed but it was, for increased revenues, that kind of thing. And now they've been using the pandemic as an excuse. The thing is, bars, restaurants that serve alcohol are now making out like bandits because they've got double the seating in many cases that they had, because not only are they back indoors, most of them are still using what they have outdoors. So a lot of them have probably made back all the money they've lost. So yeah. Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing with Brandon. I don't see the benefit of having 2 more hours of drinking. Maybe in a place like New York City, it makes kind of sense when people are on foot, but here you just don't have a lot of choices but to drive. I guess there's ride shares, but I just don't see the benefit of having 2 extra hours of drinking in the middle of the night or early morning. So I support this motion. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tess Taylor.
I agree with Julie Houlihan. Exactly.
All right, thank you so much. And anyone else before we vote? Okay, we will vote. So all in favor, raise your hand or say yes.
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 I say yes. I say yes, so it is unanimous. Thank you very much. This will be forwarded on to the next board meeting in 2 weeks. Agenda item 7, discussion and possible motion, community impact statement with respect to Council File 22-1100-S5, a ballot measure on the November 8th, 2022 ballot, which has no dollar amount listed for the cost of developing, constructing, or acquiring up to 5,000 additional units of low-income rental housing in each council district. And I'm going to read a proposed motion. The Board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, SCNC, opposes Council File 22-1100-S5, a ballot measure on the November 8th, 2022 ballot, which has no dollar amount listed for the cost of developing, constructing, or acquiring up to 5,000 additional units of low-cost rental housing in each of the 15 council districts. This motion is also to be submitted as a community impact statement, CIS to CF 22-1100-S5. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any members of the public wish to speak on agenda item number 7? Go ahead, Tess.
Thank you, Barry. So I'm glad that you guys flagged this kind of thing because there's just so much coming down the pike. It's hard to keep up with, but this is like giving the city a blank check, and big fat no to that. And even if an amount is determined, I think it needs to be costed out very carefully, because as I have found in my research of the tiny homes, while it may, be a good idea or not entirely objectionable, the soft costs associated with building a single tiny home were exorbitant, upwards of 50 to 60%. And if the city is really serious about building or buying or purchasing or constructing this type of housing, it has to be cost sensitive. These are taxpayer funds that are being spent in sometimes the worst. I would say they're being squandered. There isn't sufficient oversight. Too many people are benefiting tremendously from this, with the end result being that it just ends up costing the taxpayer an enormous amount of money, and we don't get the value that we're paying for. So number one, a cost should be associated with this. When the cost is, it should be challenged and reviewed very carefully for soft costs, which should be eliminated or reduced dramatically if the city is really sincere about making this sort of thing available in an affordable way, and also to taxpayers, because taxpayers have rights too. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and when did you see a ballot measure that's like a blank check? They usually
That's exactly
list
what it
the
is.
amount of money.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Thanks. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, a couple of things. The first thing is I guess we are allowed to have a position on ballot measures. I didn't know if we were or weren't, because in terms of like candidates, I don't think we can endorse them. But with ballot measures, I guess the neighborhood councils can ring in. The second thing is regards to the email I sent you regarding Governor Newsom's executive order, I guess way back in January of 2020, allocating something like $1.4 billion for housing for the homeless or low income housing, and Ridley Thomas's, 40-point response to that. Did you ever find out whether or not this has anything to do with it? It's like a money grab. They're like, okay, there's still money out there after the pandemic. Let's get it. So let's just say, okay, 5,000 additional units per, and then let's rake in the state money. Is there any reality in that?
There isn't. And if you look at this council file 22-1100-S5, there's nothing in it as to the source of the money. It's just saying they're going to develop, construct, and acquire 5,000 more in each council district. That's 5,000 times 15, So that's what, 75,000. So yeah, and we're not necessarily taking a position on whether this ballot measure should pass. My position is, before it's even on the ballot, tell us how much it's going to cost. And it doesn't. Go ahead, Julie.
There's two things I just wanted to get clear about. One is this is already passed, right? There's already been a vote on this in the council.
To send it to the ballot, yes.
Okay. So,
but there's still time for them to, it hasn't, the language, exact language could still be fixed that goes on the ballot. We have a short window here. So if we get it at our next board meeting, it goes out, I think can still possibly make a difference.
got it. And then I understand you're opposing it because there's no money attached. I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, this seems redundant to the HHH and what they're already supposed to be doing with housing, right? I'm just not clear why we need this except to set some type of a quota per council district. It's a little confusing to me how it relates to what's already supposed to be happening that they're completely failing at. But, you know, with regard to the budget, they set all these budgets for housing and they exceed them every single time. So yeah, I'm not even sure what the budgets mean anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, and their motion for that they voted on to send it to the ballot doesn't tell us anything, you know? Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you. I want to continue the point Julie made, which is a really good point. 5 years ago, the Triple H was passed over $1 billion, and that was to build 10,000 units. It's 5 years later. We've all seen the audits and the critique of how poorly that was handled. And now they want to increase it exponentially without a number amount. So if you do the quick math, if it was $1 billion for 10,000, and now, what did you say it was, Barry, 50,000 units? So it's
75,000, so because it's 15 times 5,000.
That's a lot more billions, and we still haven't seen the fruit from the billion and it seems like the private developers are taking care of this right now anyway. There's stuff going up everywhere for practically free. They're not subsidized. Look at Sportsman's. They're giving away 78 very low incomes, and many of the other units that are the housing developments that are going up all across the city are all factoring in the low income for the bonus incentives that they get for it. So this is, it's been said. Thank you.
But at least with Sportsman's, they're not using public money for the
Right.
subsidized units, you know. Go ahead, Brandon.
Another question that I just thought of. It says constructing or acquiring up to 5,000 additional units, up to, doesn't have to be 5,000, it could be 500 in each council district. Well, if they're acquiring apartments for low income rental housing that may or may not be subsidized, what happens to the rental market? Do the prices skyrocket because now there's less rental units available for people like me? What's going to happen to the rental market, an already horrible market?
Very true. I'll come back to you in a second, Tess. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, Brandon actually just brought up something that's important where it said up to 5,000, because I was going to say, let's bring it local. Where do we put 5,000 units in Studio City is my question, you know. A lot.
Well, it would be 5,000 in CD2, and which, you know, we're a small portion of CD2, and then 5,000 in CD4. We're also a small portion of CD4. So
okay.
Conceivably, none could be in Studio City from either council district. You know, it remains to be seen. So, and I'll go back to Tess one more time.
Thank you. So two things. I didn't have a chance to look it up before the meeting, but Barry, do you know if the chief legislative analyst report for the city or even the state exists on this ballot measure yet? Because if so, that could shed some light on the pros and cons. The chief legislative analyst for the legislature and for the city council usually can weigh in on this. Do you know about that, or have you seen it yet?
I don't believe the council file even had that info. If anybody wants to look at it right now, I don't want to leave my screen, but it's council file 22-1100-S5, and just see if there's like a legislative analyst report listed in the list of
yeah,
things.
I'll look it up, and if I find it, I'll send it to you guys. And the second thing is relative to the number of units in each council's district, or each district for that matter. The arena allocations have been made, and they're being discussed and disputed, and the state auditor Michael Tilden has issued a it's pretty damning report on the fact that the methodology used to arrive at the calculations and the numbers of these units is highly questionable, and I believe there's even legal action to challenge this. And I'm also aware through some of my advocacy of a group that is putting on a workshop town hall series to try to explain this to sort of the common man civilian, so that they understand what the impact upon them is going to be, because people see a lot going on that displeases them, but they don't know, they're not sure why or what to do about it. And I can share a link to that town hall series with you, in addition to the fact that there's a couple of cities that are suing to challenging SB 9 for which the town hall series will go into some detail, but it's intended for people who don't know a great deal about these things already.
Okay, yeah, send us any links to those meetings too. That would be great.
I will.
All right, thanks. All right, thank you. Anyone else on this one before we vote? Okay, we will vote on this item, number 7. All in favor, raise your hand or say yes.
Yes.
I'm a yes, so it is unanimous. Thank you very much for number 7. It'll be at the board meeting in 2 weeks. Going on to number 8, discussion and possible motion community impact statement with respect to Council File 22-0158, which allows for shelters and other forms of interim housing to be established and operated on properties outside of R3, RAS3, R4, RAS4, R5, C2, C4, C5, CM, M1, M2, and M3 zones during a declared shelter crisis. And I have a proposed motion for this item. The board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, SCNC, opposes Council File 22-0158 from Bonin, Rahman, and Harris-Dawson, which would allow shelters and other forms of interim housing to be established and operated on properties located outside of R3, RAS3, R4, RAS4, R5, C2, C4, C5, CM, M1, M2, and M3 zones during a declared shelter crisis. This motion is also to be submitted as a separate community impact statement, CIS to CF 22-0158. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Richard. And do I have any members of the public who would like to speak to agenda item number 8? Any members? Okay, go ahead, Tess.
Hi, we oppose this too, and just sort of catching up on your discussion of the matter so that we can remain current over in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to committee comment. Go ahead, Brandon.
Can you explain what constitutes a shelter crisis, a declared shelter crisis? Does it fall under a certain percentage of beds unavailable, or what does the city of Los Angeles call a shelter crisis? Is it a hard number or a hard percentage, or is it flexible? Because it sounds like. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think we're in one now, and I think the city council voted that we were in one, and the mayor signed it.
What defines
So
it?
it was,
Because they could they could declare a shelter crisis, but if there's no number, like say we're down to 5%, we're up to 95% capacity throughout the city, that's a shelter crisis. But is that a hard number? Is it something we could point to and say, okay, we're beyond that, we're in a shelter crisis, as opposed to they can call a crisis whenever they want to, and then impose this?
yeah, I think there is wiggle room for them to declare it based on a lot of different criteria. But their council file doesn't say anything about that. So go ahead, Julie.
She's muted.
Oh, unmute.
It's interesting that you brought this because I was going to bring it to the homeless committee also. It's very controversial in terms of the feedback. I don't know if everybody got to look, but a lot of the neighborhood councils have weighed in on this. And like downtown, Highland Park, North Westwood, Echo Park, Reseda, and North Hollywood all support it. And then opposed, Toluca Lake, Arleta, Sunland Tahunga, Mar Vista, Chatsworth, West LA, Sawtelle, West Side, and Venice. So that's an interesting split there. And then there's a couple of others like Mar Vista and Bel Air, Beverly Crest that are either neutral or support if they look at certain considerations, like the CEQA, which I guess is environmental compliance, consideration of removing the public's right to transparent approval process, all these different reasons why I guess why you would oppose it, right? Noise, pollution, transparency with the public being able to approve these things. There's a lot of lists of reasons or considerations. So it is interesting how much support it has, I guess, which just tells me how big that people are realizing how bad the crisis is. I don't think I personally support it because I think of our neighborhood specifically and the places where people would congregate, frankly, would make me a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm with you in opposing it, but I'm interested in the fact that so many people support it. And I just wanted to make sure that I bring that up for the group.
It's interesting that Arleta is in opposition because I would class Arleta with a lot of the other communities that voted for it. But I think the ones that were all for this, they don't read what it says here. It's interim housing for shelters and other forms. Interim housing. That means it's someplace that somebody's going to be housed on a temporary basis. And frankly, in my opinion, I don't even think R3, R4, and R5 should even be included in this. If you take C2, 4, 5, CM, and the M1, M2, M3 zones, that's a ton of land in the city of LA to put temporary interim housing on. So, you know, supposedly interim housing is supposed to be temporary. We're supposed to solve this problem eventually. So, you know, so the fact that they want to put it on R1 and R2, it's like, it just makes no sense to me. I don't think any of it should be on anything residential. It just, you know, where's the quality of life for our existing residents, you know, when we have all this other land in these other zones? So I'll come back to you, Tess, after committee members. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you. I just want to point out, I've been to all of the local locations where there are interim housing, whether they're bridge homes, shelters, or tiny homes, all within the vicinity of Studio City. This is there are none in Studio City right now, of course. Project Roomkey was one at Sportsman's. I can tell you these are industrial areas, and the areas directly adjacent to these facilities and locations, well, you should drive by them and see for yourself. See what Alexandria Park looks like. Go along Chandler by Tahunga. Go down Etna, just east of Van Nuys Boulevard, and you'll see what happens to these areas where these interim housing shelters go. There's so much controversy with the 4118. One of the bargains was if one of these is put in your area, the surrounding area will be a 4118 no encampment zone, and that hasn't happened. And these are commercial areas. I can send you links to the videos that I've taken of what goes on in this area. And this would be by right. So there would be no approval process, no nothing. They would be able to build these interim shelters and whatever those would be, because these are, some of these lots are small. Like look at the Unitarian Church where they have drop-in services for the homeless. How would that turn into an interim shelter? I mean, picture that. Picture the Unitarian Church on Moore Park and what that would look like and what that would be like if that was. And they complain that they're not allowed to do it because of their location in an R1 zone. Well, that's right. It's an R1 zone. So I would say they shouldn't do it there.
All right, go ahead, Brandon.
To comment on what Scott said, I think it would look fine for the cameras of the 2028 Olympics if there were no homeless people on the road. I'm not going to presume that the LA City Council is thinking 5 years ahead. I wouldn't give them that much credit, as Scott's chugging some water. But I think this might have something to do with that. They're gearing up for the 2028 Olympics, and they're looking to get as many options available to them when the time comes to clean the streets and make LA look good for the world. That's my take on it. I could be 100% wrong. I could be incorrect, but it sure seems that way.
Yeah, all for 17 days. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with having this in an M3 zone, which is the most noxious use, like for pig slaughterhouses and for heavy industry. I think it's going to cause other expenses having people in these zones, like taking over an old Oscar Mayer factory, something like that. Seems like not a good idea. The other thing is I know it leaves out places like SL zones. So people can have their boat, their houseboat in an SL zone and they'd be allowed. Seemed like not a good idea to me.
All right, remember our motion's only talking about outside of all these zones that list, so it would be anything other than the ones we're listing. Okay, back to Tess, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Julie, a lot of lobbying goes into getting these ordinances put forward. So I don't know that it's generally a populist thing to have it there. I think it's very politically and financially motivated. I don't think this is coming from the people. And besides, when we look at all of these measures in some ballot measure that we just discussed, this housing, the 5,000 units per district, what happens if all of these are approved in some way or another? Is anybody keeping track of this? I don't think so. A couple things to note with respect to this. When does this interim housing go away? Does it ever go away? And what conditions need to prevail before it does? They have to be objective and stated. Tiny homes, for example, are those here permanently or are those temporary? Councilmember Krikorian has stated on July 1st in council session, and I think even more recently over the debate about 4118 and the amendment to it that was voted on this week, he said that we have to, as a city, get beyond and end this state of emergency. So Brandon's point is very well put, that we have to define what the state of emergency is and when it will end, because it has to be understood and we have to move beyond it, or at least understand what it will require. And last, I will say that Ron Galperin, the city controller, has organized and identified a number of city properties within LA that could be used for this purpose. Nobody has been able to answer why we are not putting those properties to use, instead of once again imposing upon the quality of life of residential communities, which I think is a very bad idea. And we shouldn't simply accept that this is the way it's going to be. Their premises have to be questioned and they have to be challenged, in my opinion. And when the argument is that the homeless have to be near services, well, that's fine. Why can't services be built in a more remote area? Why do they have to all be in the 91602 or the 91604 area code that's already built out? These areas are fully developed. So they can make all the demands they want, but that doesn't mean they all have to be acquiesced to. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else before we vote? Okay, I'll take the vote. All in favor, raise your hands for yes or say yes.
Motion.
I'm a yes.
Can you reread the motion?
This is
Yes,
yes to
I can.
opposing it, correct?
Yes. So the board of the studio, so we are opposing them allowing this interim housing outside of where it's currently allowed. So in other words, if this passed, they could do it in R1 and R2 zones. So the board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, SCNC, opposes Council File 22-0158, Bonin, Rahman, Harris Dawson, which would allow shelters and other forms of interim housing to be established and operated on properties located outside of R3, RAS3, R4, RAS4, R5, C2, C4, C5, CM, M1, M2, and M3 zones during a declared shelter crisis. This motion is also to be submitted as a separate community impact statement. And I put statements, it should be singular, CIS to CF 22-0158. So now we'll take the vote. All in favor, raise your hands for yes.
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
So we are unanimous. Thank you. 2 weeks, be at the board meeting in 2 weeks. Number 9, moving on, comments from committee members on subject matter within the committee's jurisdiction.
May I
Go ahead.
May I ask a
Yeah.
technical question, Barry, please?
Yes, yes, yes.
What is the, I hear in your making of this motion, so you're doing two things at once. You're making a motion, and once the motion is approved and then passes to the board and passes at the board level, then it will become a CIS. So it is both a motion.
Then then our secretary sends it in as a community impact statement, but we also we will send it to, we always send it automatically to our 2 council members, and we often CC others, members of their staff and stuff.
Okay.
So it goes to a wide range of people besides the CIS.
All right. I just wanted to understand your process. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's why it says it's being submitted as a separate community impact statement. Yes.
Got it.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Do you think talking about the new Board of Neighborhood Commissioners commissioner is apropos for this committee? Because there is no other committee that could talk about this Garcetti appointment that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So is this something you'd wish to tackle?
At the board meeting, and I could give to Scott that you're bringing, or we could wait and do it at our September meeting. I had another question too. Maybe you know the answer. When Garcetti makes these appointments, I believe all appointments are null and void when a new mayor takes over. Essentially, everybody's considered to have submitted their resignation, and the new mayor gets to appoint everything. Does anyone know the answer to that? I don't think.
I think appointments. I don't know. I think that it's the mayor's prerogative to remove appointments and replace them. But I know at the federal level, I don't think they're null and void. I think that it's the president's prerogative to keep certain people if they so choose. I'm not sure about that. Richard would know. Richard's been around this block a few times. Do you have the answer for that, Richard?
No, I do not know that at all. Although remember, a lot of these people that are appointed are already federal employees at some lesser level, so they just bounce back to where they were. Like for example, locally, what basically is when they fired Thomas Noguchi, he just bounced back to become the highest paid retiree in county history, because he one time was a coroner, and they fired him. He went back to where he was before, and his retirement was beyond belief.
I just always found it to be a conflict of interest where the executive director, the general manager of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, is an appointee of Mayor Garcetti, and the very commission that acts as a bridge between us and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment are all appointees of Mayor Garcetti. It makes no sense to me. It never has.
Well, yeah, and so the person in charge of Bonk, that person certainly could be gone under the next mayor, because the next mayor could come in and either keep them or say, I want your resignation, because they have a new person in mind. But I think that goes for mayors, appointees, to boards and commissions of people that receive no pay. You know, like people on the South Valley Planning Commission. I believe any of them could be out, but I don't know for sure. I think the new mayor could ask for resignations, you know? So it remains to be seen. But anyway, how do we want to oppose this particular person?
Well, this person doesn't have any history with the neighborhood council system, I believe. I believe this person was an assistant in the mayor's office. Then I think worked at the city attorney. Scott knows more about this than I do, and Jeff knows a lot more about this than I do. Worked with the city attorney for a little bit. Worked with the staff. I don't know if it was under Anna Guerrero or someone else for the mayor. But her father is a lobbyist, if I understand that correctly. He owns a company that's a PR firm that works with the city. So it just seems like a very odd appointment that directly affects us, and we really don't have a committee. Bylaws and operating procedures is not the proper committee for it. It would have to be this, or it would be brought directly to the board. I don't know where it would go if we want to discuss it.
Well, and so she's now been appointed to Bonk, right? And I don't believe the Bonk people receive, the Bonk commissioners, they don't receive salaries. I don't believe it's one of the commissions that does. But you know, maybe I should send Jeff an email and offer him to write something in opposing this person, and he could bring it to the board meeting in 2 weeks, you know, rather than wait for 4 weeks till our next meeting. Does that sound like a good idea?
You're asking the wrong person. Talk to the president.
Yeah. Scott?
If Jeff will write it, sure. I mean, the public
All right.
comments in the council file have quite a bit of information backing
Yeah.
that up. And I think I spoke to another neighborhood council, and they're getting into this too. I'll call her tomorrow and see how far they've gotten. If they have,
Okay.
if they're ready.
Do you know what the
And
council
I'll
is?
send something.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask if he had the council file number. I was curious to read up on it.
Yeah, I have it open here along with a lot of others. Hang on. Where'd she go? Hold on. I think I have about 25 council files open. Yeah, so give me a minute.
I think, well, I thought I had it, something from Jeff.
Here we go. It's 22-1200-S43. Jennifer Valdiva. 22-1200-S43.
You know, it's interesting. I never even thought about it, but the person she's replacing, I wonder if this is one of the individuals who were the original 4 who voted against the digital communications policy, and maybe one of the 2 individuals who miraculously were absent when it was reconsidered. I'm curious about that. I have to go back and see, but
She's replacing Qin Vo Ramirez, who was resigned.
Okay, I think she was one of the ones that voted against it, but I'm not
And
sure.
it's pending in Arts, Health, Education, and Neighborhoods Committee. So they haven't acted on it yet.
Go ahead, Tess.
Hi, in doing some research on this, I was sort of getting some background information on the then current Bonk commissioners. And the one who this new commissioner is replacing apparently was one of the more, friendly and favorably inclined toward neighborhood councils and really represents a loss to the commission. But Brandon, that's a good point too. I wonder if she got on the wrong side by her vote. But I'll find out more and share with you what I learned.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And I will get in touch with Jeff and see if he wants to write something. I'll copy you, Scott,
Sure.
and we'll see where that goes. If he doesn't, we may just do it for our next meeting, but it would be nice to do it sooner than later. And I think from what Jeff's already sent me, he'd probably be willing to do it. So we'll go that route. Anyone else?
Yeah, this
Yes,
is
Julie.
last day to act, August 12th, 22. What does that mean? It's on the council file on the main page.
It means the council's got to approve her appointment by that date. So, we're not going to chime in before they vote. And frankly, they're going to vote her in anyway. But at least we can register our discussed with it like so many other neighborhood councils are and probably will. So,
Barry,
yeah.
would you be so kind if Jeff is willing to write a motion or statement? Could you share that with me? Because I agree, I think timing is important here.
Yes, I will. Whatever, if he has something, I'll share it with you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anyone else on number 9? All right, I'll move on to number 10, closing comments. Just to say our next meeting, first Wednesday in September, which I think is before Labor Day. I don't have a September calendar in front of me, but I think it's the Wednesday before Labor Day. It might be the first or second. So at 6 p.m. Anyway, first Wednesday in September. So moving on to number 11, adjournment. I move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie. Second, all in favor of adjourning, raise your hands. I'm a yes.
Yes.
We are unanimous. Thank you. All right,
Good night.
thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you,
See you at the
Barry.
board meeting. All right, bye.
Bye.